Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday morning in November. This conversation is actually kicking off Gordon School's 2020 season of generosity. And generosity isn't just about receiving a gift, it's also the gift that you experience when you are generous. And generosity is an act that can change the world, and it affects how we feel about ourselves and those around us. So today we have two very special and exciting guests to share their own experiences with living generously and how they have infused generosity into their own lives and the lives of those around them. So first, I'd like to welcome Rodney López. Born and raised in the Bronx, Rodney is a seasoned and sought-after educator, artist, and nonprofit leader. His professional background includes successful tenures in teaching artistry in public schools in New York City and beyond, corporate communications and public relations, and a nonprofit leadership. Since joining the Gordon community with Dr. Thomas Lopez, he's enjoyed bringing social dance residences to the middle school, leading family dance days, which we cannot wait to come back post-COVID, and serving on the admissions team. So you'll see Rodney here around campus. And also please join in welcoming Fran Loosen, a longtime friend of the Gordon School. She's a nonprofit leader who's currently the Engagement and Advancement Strategist at Providence, the Avenue Concept. You'll see their work in her background here on Zoom, but also adorning the buildings of Providence if you go out for a socially distanced walk anytime soon. So her career has taken place at the intersection of philanthropy, entrepreneurship, art, and social justice. And she's a proud parent of two Gordon graduates who understand the importance of giving back to their communities. So Rodney and Fran, again, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom on generosity. And can you please share a bit about your philanthropic journey and what living generously means to you? We have a little time here, so we'll start with Rodney.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody for being here today. It's good to see you all. This is just one of my favorite things to talk about. It's something that's personally and deeply meaningful to me. My generosity journey comes from really experiencing a place of lack and scarcity, a place where one would think counterintuitively that one can't be generous. Just a little bit about my story for some context. As Claire said, I'm born and raised in the Bronx, born and raised to two proud Puerto Rican parents who were born and raised in Puerto Rico, who valued education, parents who were not able to finish high school, and when coming to New York, really inculcated in me, like most people in this country, that education is the way out, right? Education is the next step. And so that was something we took very seriously at home. And so for me, success meant going to college, graduating from college, and getting the upwardly mobile job, right? That's the American dream, education and the upwardly mobile career. And so when I started that process, I thought I was doing okay, starting in a career in public relations and doing well, first in the nonprofit space and then doing corporate communications at a downtown PR firm. What I realized very quickly was that this was not what was giving me joy. This is not what was giving me happiness and satisfaction in my life. And so through a series of happy accidents, I started dancing salsa. And after I started dancing salsa, I started teaching salsa. And after I started teaching salsa, I decided this was going to be my career. Very much to my father's great disappointment, who basically said, listen, I was a salsa musician. I made no money doing that. And this isn't what I sent you to school for. And what are you doing? And soon after that, you buy into the idea that if you just do what you love, the money will come. Well, didn't happen in my case. I did what I loved, and what came was debt. What came was more debt. What came was my student loan debt from college, my credit card debt from college, and my tax debt from not managing my finances properly. And so by the time you fast forward about 10 years, I have a young family, I've got mouths to feed, and I'm running around the city at night teaching dance, and during the day teaching dance to students in public schools through this wonderful organization, Dancing Classrooms, that I was a part of for nearly 20 years, and very much drowning in my own financial mess. But more important than the financial mess was the shame that came with it, was the embarrassment that I had somehow let down my family, that I had let down myself, and I should know better. I should have known how to manage my money better. I should have known how to manage my debt better. And how could I have made such stupid decisions? And now I've got people depending on me. And I went through a very long period of very private anxiety and depression as a result. Publicly, I was just fine. You couldn't tell there was anything wrong, but inside I was agonizing over what I perceived to be just my boneheaded financial mistakes and letting down my family. So carrying the generational guilt, carrying, there's a gender piece here, carrying male guilt, carrying all of this stuff that society says you're supposed to do was a very heavy burden. And I had a moment of faith. And I'm not going to tell the story right now because Claire's got a question about it later. I'll tell the actual story about the change in perspective. But for this introduction, I'll just say I came to a point where I realized that the only way to break out of this was to do something I'd never done before. And stepping out in a moment of faith around giving financially, meaning practicing generosity in the place where it actually hurt to do so, was a life-changing decision for me, because it separated my worth, my self-worth, and how I saw myself with my earning potential and the way I managed my money. There was a direct relationship between the two, which I didn't see at the time, but became very clear over time. And so my generosity journey, my philanthropic journey, all of that began out of a moment of just personal crisis, seeing that I had nothing and I had nothing but lack and scarcity, and I needed something radical to get out of it. And actually giving my way out of it it just changed my life. It changed my life in ways that I'm still marveling at right now. And so this is something that's very personal for me. It's something I've written on. It's something I've spent, nearly 15 years studying, because I believe that the giving practice, a generosity practice, is life-changing can be life-changing for any of us. And so I'm just excited to be here to be able to talk about this with you all. So thank you for being here and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Rodney. And we're looking forward to diving deeper into that. And Fran, I'd love to hear kind of how your generosity journey has started as well.
Well, first of all, Rodney and I had a chance to talk before this event, and I just marveled at the beauty of and the way his face lights up when he talks about this. So I'm always touched by, Rodney, by your words and just your life experience. And our life experiences starting out were a little bit different, but I think we end up at the same space, which I really love. I grew up in a really small town in Oklahoma, like 1,200 people. And grew up in a pretty affluent family in that area, not without its own challenges, and as money sometimes brings challenges to people's lives. But my parents were really super committed to community. They were people who were kind of givers on the DL, like they would help fund kids' schools' tuition for university without any acknowledgement. Like they did a lot of things really with the spirit of, this is not something we need to be known for. So I was always raised with that kind of idea that like the best gifts that you can give sometimes are the ones that people don't, that you're not acknowledged for. And I was always kind of grateful for that. It can also add a layer of complexity to your life. But this little town was also really founded on and deeply invested in my idea of service. So volunteering was not volunteering there. It was like, kids, Mrs. Neighborhouse's yard needs to be mowed. Go do it. Don't take any money. You can have the cinnamon sugar toast if she offers it to you. You know, it was like that kind of transactional, loving transactional space, very small farm community. And that I think those two kind of relational experiences informed the way that I have always looked at giving, and always looked at serving, and always looked at the way of building community. I also grew up in this little town was not an easy place to grow up in terms of bullying. So the third leg of this, I think, is that my experience of being kind of an outsider informed the way that I think about bringing people in and wanting to create a welcoming table for friends and people in community, and keep Glennon Doyle talks about keeping the horseshoe open. So instead of a circle, like keeping a space for people to enter. And I think that all of these things kind of wrap together in terms of the way that we think about philanthropic giving, time, talent, treasure, all of those beautiful things that we can offer, no matter our income level or no matter our generosity space. Like, we can learn to be bigger with that. So I think I'll leave it at that. I mean, I have a weird life after that, but we can talk about that later.
Great. Thank you so much, Fran, for both of you sharing where you've come from, and how definitely a through line with both is family. And that is a motivator, as well as a, kind of that, I'm lacking the word right now, but a fantastic motivator.
Stressor.
Yes, a stressor. Yes, a motivator and a stressor, and there's all sorts of baggage that we come to from our first families to our second or our current families with. So I'm really excited to open up a conversation between Fran and Rodney, and so here we go. And so I'd love for you both to share in conversation. And what does it mean to be generous, and how has that affected your outlook? And I also want to actually open that up to the larger group here of, what does that mean to you? So we can start with Fran and Rodney and see where we go from there.
You want to start, Rodney?
Sure, I'm happy to. Fran used the term a moment ago: time, talent, and treasure. We've all heard those, the 3 T's of giving: time, talent, and treasure. And I think that all 3 of those are important. There are certainly many ways to be generous. Generosity is such a big concept, and I think we can each step into generosity and giving practices in the way that is best for our circumstances, our finances, our place in life, and our season in life. For me, the entry into this idea of a generosity practice or a giving practice happened on the treasure side. For me, it was important for me to begin this process from the space of just my money. What am I doing with my money? They say that you can tell a person, right? You tell a lot about a person by looking at their calendar and their checkbook. Like, what do they do with their time? Where do they apply their funds? And so for me, the faith walk was, I'm struggling with this thing called money. I'm struggling with my budget. I'm struggling with resources. And so the only way I'm going to rattle loose, I'm going to shake those chains loose, is if I do something about it on this side and let go of this hold that this thing has on me. And so for me, generosity, it started with changing my relationship with money. But for someone else who's a workaholic, it could be loosening up some of that time and giving some time back to your community, or it could be donating some of that beautiful talent you have, as whether it's in your professional or private life, and giving that to your community. And so everybody's going to approach it a different way, but I think it's just stepping outside of your comfort zone. At the end of the day, a generosity practice, or a life lived generously, is about stepping outside of your day-to-day, the things you do every day, and stretching in service to someone else, and in service to something outside of yourself or your family.
And I think, Ronnie, to cue off of that, the thing that has always been interesting to me is that there's the experience, especially with our children. I think a lot of us are here because we're thinking about this in terms of not only ourselves, but our kids, and how do we shape this relationship for our family. And there's leading by example, which I think is obviously the most important thing we can do with our children and with our community, but also being planful. And I fall down on the planful side, even though I have in the past taught other people how to be planful about this. It's like the carpenters, or the shoemaker's children have no shoes, or what, I can't even remember. I mix my metaphors, but it's really true that, I realized when I was maybe in my 20s that to codify this work in that the things that I was kind of doing naturally, that I could actually help other young people I was working for a volunteer service organization, and our journey was to get people off of their couches and out in the community doing done in a day service work and going into leadership opportunities in the city of Portland. That was our kind of end goal, like more people activated in community, knowing about community. And so we actually started doing things like, what do you love? So, to take salsa, what do you love, Rodney? How could you leverage that and teach kids? And I love children and I love salsa. Okay, let's figure out a way that you can bring those two gifts into a way to be of service to the community. And I struggle with that with my own children now, though. That's what's so funny, is that when we sit down to talk about volunteer activities, I'm like, have to reach back into this memory and think, oh, being planful about the way that I'm contributing my time, or that I'm teaching my kids to contribute their time or talent or resources, which we can talk about too with the money side, is actually the act of being planful about it is where the rubber hits the road in a really profound way.
Thank you. And to really kind of tee off that and setting the space for generosity, is what are some ways that you've introduced your children to a generosity practice? I know that, Rodney, you've mentioned this phrase a fair number of times. And did they understand it right away? And how do you teach, children of all ages that?
They are still learning. It's a work in progress. I think the first part is, in my humble experience, it's been number one, just talking about it. It comes up, not we're going to have the generosity talk, because that never works with kids. It never worked with me. It doesn't. I don't know if it's going to work with any kid, right? At any age. But it's the casual thing. It's, oh, it felt good to give that Christmas gift, right? Or it felt good to give that birthday gift. This is all different stages, different ages. What would it be like to give something to somebody for no other reason, right? It's those teaching moments that happen in the car. It's those teaching moments that happen at the dinner table, where you get the opportunity to randomly talk about what it meant to receive something or what it meant to give something. And I've had the joy of having those impromptu conversations with my boys. And I also just have to give a lot of credit to their mother as well, because she is also someone who models that in getting them to volunteer at the breast cancer walk and at the leukemia walk. My son had an episode with epilepsy in the 7th grade, and I got the call no parent wants to get. Your son had a seizure in gym, and we all rushed. Noni was with me at that. We all rushed to the hospital to make sure that he was okay, and as a result, has volunteered with the epilepsy walk, ever since then. So there are those life moments where you just get to practice things because you have organic conversations about it. But you plan for those, as Fran said, because you plant seeds along the way.
I think with my kids, it's been interesting because what you were just saying, Rodney, about, kind of these life circumstances and experiences. I think my kids have lost a lot of family members pretty early. Like, their grandmother died very early, and I had breast cancer, and they just met with some weird challenges that you wouldn't know about them because they're very privileged and great kids, and they kind of walk through the world easily. But those have been touch points for us to be able to kind of have these deeper conversations about things like access to healthcare. And I will never forget, I told Claire the story, and I get super misty about this myself, that David and the kids and I were driving one day, David sitting in the front seat, and Planned Parenthood had just moved from being over on Point Street to their new facility, their beautiful new facility serving so many great people. And we're driving along, and I'm talking to someone on the phone, and David's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And he points and he thumps his heart and he points at the Planned Parenthood. And I was like, excuse me just for a moment. I put it on mute. I was like, did you just thump your chest at the Planned Parenthood? He's like, yeah, because that's awesome. That's their new facility. And I was like, oh my God, like he's getting it. Like for us, because access to healthcare for women is a really, and mammography and everything like that is a really big deal for our family. And so like, it's those little ways that you get cued in that like things are sinking into your family. I was going to say earlier, I was thinking about Rodney that, you know, I grew up in a faith community that I'm not part of anymore, but the first donation that I ever made was $1 to our church. Right. And that was, you know, in reflection, faith communities give you that structure. And in the absence of that, which my kids are not raised in any church, what am I going to provide? And so one of the things that we did years ago, after my mom died, was to create a donor advised fund at a community foundation. And you can do these, you know, pretty low input things. You can do them at Schwab, you can do them in different places. It's like kind of like a charitable savings account for our family, which I love because there's a little bit of money in there. And then every year we sit down and people make their lists and we decide collectively how much we're going to give away. And my parents did this with like $100 a year amongst 4 kids, which was great. You know, it's like, if we had $100, how do you think about where that money is going to go? And my brother and my father had been adopted from the same adoption agency along with my aunt. So we always gave money to that place. And then there's a center for intellectually disabled adults in my hometown. And we always gave a little bit of money there. And we, you know, like we would divide it up. And I think even that practice, it could be $5. It doesn't matter. It's just this idea that like, how do you know that the places that you want to give money to are the right places? And then how do you think about proportionality of what is important to you and what you maybe bring as legacy, things like that. So we actively use the donor advised fund for giving, but it's really actually in the work that we do with it that I think is the most important part.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, Patrice, let me unmute you.
Yeah.
There we go. Patrice, yes.
You know, I love the question about how do you learn generosity and how do you teach it to children. And I was thinking about my own, you know, growing up in Hawaii in the 50s. And my mother, I think, was the most warm, loving, and generous person. And as young children, you know, to see your mom always hugging and kissing and feeding other kids in the neighborhood was a little annoying because wait a second, you're our mom. Why are you hugging and kissing this one and that one? And she would say this thing that we never understood when we were growing up. She would say, well, love is something that the more you give, the more you get. And, you know, when you're 4 or 5 and you think, well, if I have 2 cookies and I give one away, I only have 1 cookie. I don't have 3 cookies, right? And so it took us a while to understand that. But the other thing my mother would inculcate in us, and to this day, you know, these are the words that guide me. It's always about share your cookies and toys, right? Because, and it was so ingrained in us. If we were playing and enjoying our cookies and toys and other children would come by, and we would get almost anxious that we better share our cookies and toys because mom was going to swoop in and just take them and give it to the other kids. It's like, oh my God. So actually, once I was asked to contribute to a book where CEOs, 250 of them were asked for their single greatest piece of business advice, you know, and they compiled it all in a book. So I said, yeah, my single greatest piece of business advice and life advice was from my mom, and it has served me as well on the playground as in the boardroom. And that advice is share your cookies and toys, because who's going to want to play with you, right, or do business with you? So anyway, I just wanted to share that. It really was from my mom, and my mother wasn't somebody who was actively involved in any nonprofits. I have been, and you know, for decades. And the companion piece to that was I've been a Girl Scout since I was 5 years old, growing up in Hawaii, and I've actually served on the Girl Scouts of Greater New York board for 23 years. I'm the longest serving trustee at this point. And my former PR agency actually represented Girl Scouts of the USA. So I'm really all about, you know, building girls of courage, confidence, and character who make the world a better place. So if you put those two together, it's like, you know, I have the other problem in that I don't have unlimited resources, but there's so much need, and I always feel the desire, the need to share what I have, even when it's like, is this a really good time? Because you're already giving. And I'm going to end there, but I also wanted to say up front, when you asked the question about our experience with giving and nonprofits, that I'm here because of Rodney López, who is one of my personal heroes. I was the chair of the board when he was our executive director, and he was fabulous. I mean, we miss him all the time, his leadership in so many areas, and his generosity of spirit and heart. And I am a huge fan of Rodney. So whatever he's doing, you know, I'm in. So anyway, I'll end it there. But thank you, Rodney, for all that you've done for us and for me, and for doing what you're doing in the world. You know, I adore you.
Thank you. Thank you for thank you so much for sharing that. And that really brings up a fantastic question of, you know, there's the formal volunteering and formal donations, as we would say, Fran mentioned, in a, you know, a religious setting, or, you know, formally making a donation to an organization. And then there's the informal, share your toys and your cookies. I personally have a 3-year-old, and we're working on share your toys and your cookies every day. So I'd love, Rodney and Fran, you know, talking about that, you know, teaching generosity, and how would you teach a 3-year-old? And then I also was tipped off, Rodney, you have an envelope practice that I would like to hear a little bit about.
So envelope, first of all, and I love envelopes. I just love envelopes, and envelopes saved my life. So many of you may be familiar with envelope budgeting, and sort of what changed my perspective to money was this idea of zero-based budgeting. Like, you start from zero and you figure out how much you can spend. Envelope-based budgeting is, this is what you have, let's see how we direct your resources. And that just changed my perspective on, like, what went in and out of my bank account. And so that was an important first step in just getting my arms around my sort of, you know, my financial situation. But with my children, they got 3 envelopes. They got give, save, and spend. And every time they got an allowance, or anytime they got a gift for their birthday or Christmas, or just grandpa was being generous with them and threw them some cash just for being grandpa, it was, all right, give it to me, because you have to model it first. Hand it over to dad. Don't worry, there isn't going to be a dad tax. Those I impose later for other things. But there's going to be, you know, 10% of this you're going to give, 10% of this you're going to save, and the rest you can spend. And literally putting it in 3 envelopes in their bedroom. And they continue to do this today as teenagers. And the reason why that works is it gets them to think about proportionality, and it gets them to understand, even at a very young age, that their giving matters, and that what they have comes to them as a result of the generosity of the universe. So they need to be a conduit for giving back, because none of us really earn anything in the universal sense, right? We're just conduits, currency, right? It comes through us, goes out, because we're interconnected as a society. And so we've modeled that in our household, and it's worked very well. And the biggest reward, friends, is now I see them taking this on their own, you know, without me prodding them. I see them at the end of every year looking at their toys, looking at their comic books, looking at their games, looking at their clothes, and saying, who needs this more than we do? And organizing their own drive, their own giving practices. And, you know, I don't have to tell you, everyone here who's a parent, that nothing warms your heart more than seeing your child just take on a value, like Fran was saying, you know, thump in the chest at the Planned Parenthood when they get it, And when they own the concept, there's no greater feeling as a parent.
We did the envelope thing too, and to varying degrees of success, to be honest, because again, it's like also you can create a system, but the system has to be minded, intended for it to happen. And I was just trying to look up, I'm sorry, I was distracted because I was looking up, there's a card for people with older kids now. There's a debit card that you can get, because banks will not give children under the age of 18 a bank account, which I think is insane. It's insane. Like, how do our kids learn how to manage money, even if it's backed? But there is a card now that a company is doing that's a debit card, but it's this debit card that you can control on an app, and there is a spend, save, give function on it. So I'll try to find that and share that with people, because I think that is, learning to manage money is also something that young people don't have a lot of skills with. I had zero. I mean, this is where Rodney and I are like right in, because I grew up in a family of bankers and I never learned how to manage money. And it was, to this day, we all struggle with money issues. Susie Orman's like, everybody's got a story with money. Everybody does. It doesn't matter if you grew up super wealthy or super, low SES, everybody's got a story with money. Everybody. So the more that we can help our children develop better financial skills, and part of that being this like flow of generosity, the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra. When I was 22 years old, I read that, and he was like, you got to give away money to have it come back to you. And I was like, it sounds like some craziness, and it's totally true, right? The other thing I'm going to say, our family mantra, well, we have a family mantra, which I will not share with you right now, which is don't be a jerk, but it's a worse word, DBAD, which is actually super useful. But the other one is, Arthur Ashe said, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And that has huge challenge, personal challenge, and also in times of tons of plenty is like, okay, where are we? What do we have, and what can we do? And as a family, using these tools of like the envelope system, and we do the same thing. It's like, always hold up a little bit, where are you going to give it? But also like, then how do you reset yourself? And like, we do it at the end of the year because it just feels like it's the season. But that creating a practice is, I think, actually a huge part. The financial literacy thing is to me the biggest issue to tackle, because that creates a space of generosity, because kids know where they are all the time, and they can be more operative as a result.
Amanda.
Yes, so we've experimented with the spend, save, give with clear containers so they could actually sort of see things growing. My question to you, Rodney, because your kids are a little older, is the give part they were excited about, they could visualize it. The difference between spending and saving was harder. Like, how much as a parent do you let them blow the thing on, something you would, how do you let them fall with that?
That's a great question. I think I saw Noni put in the chat that one of the things you're concerned about is, how are they going to do the delayed gratification thing? Like, are they going to be watching that spend thing grow and then like, yes, I'm getting a new PlayStation? What was, at least with my kids, and I think because we paid attention to it, I think, Francis, about how do you mind the thing? We were pleasantly surprised in our household that these envelopes just got fat. And then they just didn't want to spend. And I would actually say, RJ, you can spend this. Like, take some, nah, I actually don't need anything. I already have what I need. And then I'm like, okay, now my kid's an alien. Like, that's not my kid, right? Like, it's like, no. Like, you actually have some, it's okay. You have permission to spend it. Nah, no, it's okay. But we're going to the movies and you can spend. Yeah. I'd rather just have extra for the next time. So I mean, those may just be my kids, and they just may be weird. And they may be weird, but I do think that with the save and the spend, what they did realize over time was that I don't have to spend it as soon as I get it. And man, I wish I learned that when I was 12. Like, I just wish I had that lesson. And so what they have in their own little their own little bubble of an economy, their own personal economy, is they have abundance. Like they know what the feeling of abundance is in their own little economy. And so now that they're a little older, Amanda, what I say is, okay, you know what that feels like to have a little extra, to know that you have a little bit extra in your envelope, and now you don't have to ask me if you can have that. You can buy what you want at GameStop or something like that. You know, they have a practical application for it. So for a couple of years there, Ahmed, it was strange, because you're right, they were excited about giving, and then there was no distinction between saving and spending, because they just didn't have anything to spend it on. But as they've gotten older, I think they're seeing the wisdom in it, because now they have things they want to spend the money on that they at 17 that they didn't need to spend at 14.
I also think that, Amanda, to your point, it's important to let them fail.
Yeah, I have one kid that wants to save, and the other, it's like hotcakes out of her wallet. I mean, it just
but also, it can go both ways. Like you can have a child who has a lot of anxiety because they're such a saver and they become tight with it. So I think that some of this, and it just to be in the philanthropic space about helping you gotta, if you have an anxious child, you can work both ends of the spectrum on that. Like I can't let anything go because I'm anxious about letting anything go. And then you have to teach them that it's okay, or a kid that is like, oh, it's like, well, you don't have any money left. And if you want to have data on your phone, here's the bill. I don't do this. Again, this is one of these things where like I'm saying something that I don't do very well, but I do really think that the failure part of this is important. And also just in terms of philanthropic giving, like kids can be taught to like, is that the best place to donate your money, right? Like one of the places that David always gives to came from Gordon, and it's EJI. And I'm like, well, why EJI? Tell me about EJI. I'm like, because I know it's heartstrings for you, but like, what are they doing? And he was like, boop, 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 boop. Like he could say like, this contribution going to this place is going to do X, and this is why I want to contribute, instead of it just being like something that he saw on Instagram that he was touched by, which is also important. But you know what I mean? So like being prudent or being thoughtful about like generous giving is I think equally as important, teaching older kids how to assess a 501c3. Are you giving to a political campaign that's not going to be in line with your values? Whatever it is. So.
Yeah, so a great question came through that in the age of COVID, where we're not going to our religious institutions, we're really not volunteering in person, we're not attending walks, helping in soup kitchens. How can you model and show this behavior to, 3, 4, 5-year-olds?
We made little kits for people who are asking for money at streetlights, and the kids would always ask, why aren't we giving them money? But you can get them involved in making Ziploc bags with deodorant and toothbrush and all that. And they used to be so afraid to do it. And that's been really fun to see the evolution that they want to scramble to the cart and grab it. So, I mean, your kids can sort and, make packages and then see you give them. That's been fun.
This sounds weird, and I don't know that it actually went well, but there was a great book, and it's by John J. Muth, and I can't think of the name. It's The Panda. I can't even remember the name of it, but my kids haven't been little for a long time. But in this thing, the Panda talks about giving away his birthday cake, which, for kids is like, oh, my birthday cake. But we would do birthday cake runs to all of our neighbors who were older when they were little. And it was this kind of interesting fluidity that like in our family, food is really an important conveyor of love and connection, which we, many families have that. You have always the best talks over a good meal, but also that just like you get to celebrate you being on the earth as well. And that's kind of a nice thing. Like you're giving your birthday cake to other people to say thank you for yourself being on the earth. It sounds kind of convoluted, but the kids were like, whatever, mom. Like they were kind of like your family, like, all right, mom, you're saying I should do this. We're going to do it. So sometimes things land and sometimes they don't. That's the other thing. And just be flexible. Like if we get too rigid with this and it doesn't work for our kids, like let's pivot. Think about what you can do instead.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to open it up. Some of, everyone has children of different ages here. Maybe when your children were real small, something that has worked well to share that spirit of generosity and how to really convey that message to them. Maybe they're older now. We are a community of, Amy.
I was just going to say two things. First of all, thanks. This is really inspiring and helpful and a little bit stress inducing, just all the things that we have to like organize and mind for our children. But so I've had, I like the envelope idea and have had little success with it. But what I have felt like more success with is, and I got this idea from someone else, is for Hanukkah, instead of just like getting gifts every day like I did when I was a kid, or is that we do 4 days of giving and 4 days of receiving and try to alternate them so it's not, so packed. And that requires some planning. So I'm like starting to think about that now, especially with COVID. In years past, we've gone and helped make sandwiches for Crossroads and went to, pet shelters and things like this. But for right now, and maybe other neighborhoods have this, there's a organizing group in my neighborhood that is bringing groceries to elderly folks in the neighborhood who can't get out to stores. And so I'm actually planning to take Isaiah with me this afternoon on a run. I usually do it when they're at school, but because he's been home, because of 6th grade being home, I can take him with me. So he can be part of that and just stay in the car. So just trying to find things where like they can be part of right now with COVID, but not interfacing with people so much.
Yeah. So something else that I've seen is, and I know Gordon did this fantastically in the spring, it's called the Chalk campaign. And so it's spreading the spirit of generosity and spreading the warmth really of, there's a assisted living facility not too far from my house, and decorating the sidewalks. They, the residents there can walk among the grounds. We see them. And I know that they're not getting many visitors just, because of COVID. And so little things like that, I think also are great for small children. Another thing is card writing. So there's, in my family, yes, it's food. Everything's around food and inviting people to your table and all those types of activities which are just not safe right now. And so something we're doing through my temple is sending cards and kind of a letter writing and card writing campaign of saying, I'm thinking of you. And that is a feeling of generosity that your children can feel when giving that gift. And so I also wonder if anyone has any comments, Everin out here in the Zoom conversation of what it feels like to receive a generous gift of not just, if you were having a hard financial time, but just what does it feel when someone's generous towards you? And if anyone wants to share that, and then how we can kind of mirror that and model that for our children.
I'll share something. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you, and thank you, Fran and Rodney, for this conversation. One of the things that I definitely have received, and I've especially received it now, have just been affirmations from people, whether it's on the sidewalk or a quick email or notes that have landed on my desk. And we've also seen it with I've seen it especially with middle schoolers. I know that we do affirmations here. I know they do them in some forms in their morning circles and whatnot. I did one at the end of the year with an 8th grade class when I taught, when I was the middle school head at Nightingale in New York. And we just had the kids go around, they took out a name. So they had someone else's name, whether they were friends with them or not. And we went around the circle and everyone said an affirmation for that person, something they'd done, made them feel, something they'd seen that maybe that girl had not even known someone had noticed or seen. And they, it struck them very deeply. I think because it was coming sometimes from girls that they didn't think knew them, were friends with them, or whatnot. And afterward, they said, Ms. Thomas, can we do this again? And I think it came from, number one, receiving that affirmation and feeling that you've been appreciated and seen. But also they liked doing it. And I think they liked digging a little deep to see somebody in a new way that they had not before. And so I think giving our children opportunities to think about the things that they're grateful for, the people they're grateful for, and then going the next step to let them know, how would you say that to them, or how would you tell that to them, I think is both gratitude and generosity, which I think are so closely linked.
I'd like to share, I think the downside of growing up with without need is that you feel like you're embarrassed when you actually do feel like you need something. And a memory that I have that is seared into my brain for the rest of my life was my dad died when I was 16, and we had I came home to, I'd been out of the state, and I came home, and all of these people who we knew so well had come into our house and cleaned the whole house, and they had brought extra refrigerators for the food. And it was humbling, and it felt humiliating, honestly, if I like allow myself to go there, that we had to ask for help. And I remember, I get really misty when I talk about this, because it also happened. My brother died 4 years later, and the same thing happened. And we were like, oh, but one of our family friends was like, just let it be, let people love you. It's okay. And I think that, there's in this relationship sometimes of like, I have so much and I feel guilty about it. And how do I think about generosity, and how do I, try to push that out? Is that like, you create a space where you can't accept something back. And the true gift is that like, we're all walking each other home. Like Ram Dass says, like, we are all, our greatest love is to learn to accept things. And I'm 49 years old and I'm still not good at it. So like, accepting love and generosity back is as important as giving it out. And that I think is also an important thing for us to teach our children, is to understand the deep inequities of this world, and also be able to be accepting of love and kindness and generosity too. Because that is, if not, it gets stuck like that. It gets stuck again, and then it's just this, and that's not healthy. So, pardon my little teary moment, but
thank you, Fran. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a great point to really reiterate, of being able to accept that generous gift and how that feels, and how to accept things at tough times. So thank you. I'm kind of checking the chat, see if we have any more questions. Is there anyone? You can write them in the chat if you have anything you'd like to add. If not, I have a couple more I'd love to ask, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, the conversation that's happening over here in the chat is really fantastic about, how to teach awareness to our children at all different ages, and what's, how to have that conversation of, I know, Fran, you touched upon this a little bit. What's a worthy 501c3, which would be a nonprofit, and then, also political agencies that accept money. So Harmony, I know that's not Celia. So Harmony.
I know. I can't figure out how to change it.
It's okay.
A couple of things. First, Fran, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it's something so silly, but our dog passed away in the spring, and a few, people sent me really lovely notes and cards, including Amanda Regal, who sent me a really nice heartfelt card about how much her dogs meant to her family right now, and how it's so hard. I'm crying right now, and it's my dog, and I felt so guilty because people are dying across our country, and this tragedy is happening, and people took time to reach out and acknowledge that that's a loss too. But I felt so guilty about having those kindnesses and thoughts come to me when I am, not that I've never had, tragedies, but right now we're good. You know, we are good. So I know exactly how you feel. It's a weird, I'm the person who wants to help other people. Like I don't need it, but we all need it, you know? So it's a funny feeling. But on a more helpful note, I love every year reading a column that Nick Kristof writes in the New York Times, and he evaluates nonprofits and breaks down the amount your gift is actually going to a particular need. So he will recommend nonprofits, and I read it with my kids in at the end of last year, so December 2019, and we chose gifts to make from that list and talked about where it was going and how much of our money was going to actually help people who really needed it, and not pay executive salaries and whatnot. So that's a really nice resource, and he writes that every year. So I really enjoy reading that. And on Amanda's point earlier about the spend save conundrum, so the book that I put in the comments, The Opposite of Spoiled by Ron Lieber, he talks about that, and at some point he suggests you could give your kids like their clothing budget for the year, and they have to buy what they need for the year, and if they forget to buy a raincoat and they've spent all their money, well, then they don't have a raincoat and they get wet. And then we haven't actually done this yet though, but it's a fascinating idea, right? Like they don't have rain boots, their sneakers are gonna be wet and their feet will be wet all day. They'll remember to buy rain boots next time they have the money. So I just thought that was a brilliant idea for the brave.
And especially here on Gordon campus on a day like today, rain boots, you know, they enjoy them. And then they can fall in the pond, which I love it when it's always, you know, an accident. So thank you for that, Harmony. And I just really want to highlight in the quote, everyone deserves to have their pain be witnessed and held. And I think a lot of times we all feel that we are maybe supposed to be or have traditionally been the caregiver. And so to receive that care is often very hard. And so I absolutely hear that. This has been, and I know that some people have had to run to other meetings, and I really want to highlight how wonderful this has been a way to start our day, start the week, and really kick off the first season of generosity here at Gordon. And again, generosity is many different things to many different people, and we're so lucky to have you all here in this conversation with us today. There have been a number of suggestions, some book titles, and Nick Kristof's op-ed, I guess it would be, that comes out, as well as some different quotes and different things. And so I'm absolutely jotting them down. And when we are recording this conversation, be able to share them out. Jeff has also shared the link on where you can all find them. So again, this has been so wonderful, and we're so lucky to have all of you with us today. And are there any last questions that anyone has to pop in?
Not a question. I just want to say I really enjoyed this morning. Fran, it was amazing listening to you. You're just very engaging and a great just speaker speaking about this thing. So it's been awesome. And Patrice, I don't know you, but I want to give you a big hug. I don't know if she's still here. I've just enjoyed this. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's so great to hear so many different voices with everyone's different perspective, and how generosity has affected them, and what it feels like to receive gifts, and how we can all receive that help and healing that we all need. And so again, Fran and Rodney, your knowledge and passion about this topic of generosity and philanthropy is truly inspirational as a philanthropy professional as well. I think from our first conversation through this entire time, I'm in awe and come out with a large reading and listening podcasts and different things I need to kind of continue the learning journey. So please continue to check your emails and social media and blog posts for this season of generosity in our Gordon community. Many of us are needing that extra hug and can't physically get that. And we'll definitely work with everyone to provide opportunities that we can continue to make our Gordon community and the wider community of the world a better place. And with all of you and all the children you are raising, I believe we're on a very, very great path. So happy Friday, everybody. The sun is coming out, and thank you so much.